I'll start us off.
Okay, I got it recording. Go ahead, Jared.
Hi, Dr. Meeks. This is slide deck 5 for Team 19. We'll go ahead and jump right into creativity. Now, creativity, in my own words, is really just problem solving. So in business, we have all of these problems thrown at us. Really, business exists because problems exist. And we have to come up with these creative ways to solve people's problems so that the customer will be satisfied and choose to use the product. But we have been conditioned from early in age, and creativity and imagination has been kind of forced out of us, disciplined out of us since we were young, like sitting in rows in kindergarten and only speak when we raise our hand and everything. And that makes sense for like large classroom and everything, but it doesn't work as well in business. But as a manager and as an entrepreneurial manager specifically, there are many ways that we can bring creativity into the workplace. And a company that comes to mind is Pixar, and that's why I have Buzz right there from the cover of Creativity Inc. But they have dailies, they call it, where they have constant feedback in a positive way. They just write feedback into the schedule of every single day. And after big events or after things happen, they have what's called postmortems. They go over what went wrong in these things. So it's just constant feedback. And and in every business, we should encourage idea generation and brainstorming, because people tend to want to develop their ideas completely before ever bringing them and putting them on the table. But we need to encourage, no, there's no dumb ideas, and we should encourage creativity in that way. So this is just the epitome of creativity right here, and this came from a doctor who went through Stanford Design School, which we'll talk about later. But 80% of children that were at this hospital going through this MRI, which it doesn't even look like an MRI now, 80% of the children had to be sedated because they were completely freaked out. But they used creativity. Someone had the idea from the design school to come up with this huge pirate island experience, and just made it a fun experience. And it decreased to 10% of children after that had to be sedated to go through the MRI. So this is in my mind what creativity is and how we need to bring it into the workplace.
Okay, so I'll kind of talk a little bit about this slide. It's all about the future of stuff approach from Stanford, which obviously carries a heavy name. So it'd be very easy to kind of agree with everything the author said, but I'm going to take a little different stance this week. When I started reading through this stuff, it kind of reminded me of like a kid doing a magic trick. We've seen it before. They didn't get it exactly right. I guess it's good enough anyways. And bonus, sometimes it rhymes, which Jared said last week adds to its credibility somehow. So as far as the first part there where it says empathize, the approach states that we should really start with people and not the problem or solution. Kind of relates back to last week when we discussed empathy. The way it's framed is generally agreeable, but it sounds good on paper, but the reality is that entrepreneurs sometimes stumble onto problems by pure accident. I understand what the author is trying to indicate when they say that you should start with real people. I understand why they're saying it. But I think, we've discussed in past weeks that sometimes the consumer doesn't even know what they need until they're presented with a solution. Is it really any different for an entrepreneur? They may, even by accident, start by discovering a solution to a problem they never even knew they had. And for the author to indicate that you shouldn't start with the problem or solution, I think is a mistake. I don't necessarily disagree that you should start with people. As far as synthesizing, I kind of understood this as simplifying the information you already have. again, the disagreement here is the author goes out of their way to discuss need finding as opposed to problem solving. If you're problem solving real problems, then I would argue that people naturally need your solution. So it's just really kind of naming the same thing, but putting it a different way. As far as ideate, this is about brainstorming. You know, it kind of brought me back to the material this week when we were talking about brain warming. To me, it's different names for the same idea with a twist on it and how to approach it based on which author is speaking. Each author is trying to put their stamp on it. It's the same thing, rediscussed with a little twist. For prototype, it's just basically getting your ideas on paper. One of the things I didn't really necessarily agree with was the Tom Holmes video saying that we should prototype everything, every product, every idea. To me, that's totally inefficient. Should you be creating a catalog in your head? Sure. But I would say it's a fluid process, and we should focus our energy on our best ideas and not necessarily dwell on everything that comes across our mind. As far as business modeling, it's the equivalent of developing an MVP, developing a business model around it. I'm not really going to go too much into that. Step 6 and 7 are pitch and reflect. We touched on pitching our products quite a bit last week. My last disagreement with the author is when they state you should reflect as the last step. I think we should really be reflecting every step along the way. Am I being too picky? I don't think so. When, you know, what we do is often as entrepreneurs comes naturally, and these approaches are just basic outlines. I would say, if anything, they're good so that we don't neglect certain steps, but most of it's just an issue of semantics. They're blueprints of already discussed topics with a different colored bow on top. So that's kind of my take on it. As far as can we use in our careers? Yeah, every time we identify an issue at work that can benefit from process improvement, every time we identify a need that isn't being addressed in our field of practice, we can always use these types of approaches, or at least something similar to it. But anyways, I've spoken enough on this issue. I'll let Ali talk a little bit about creativity and how that plays an aspect in our careers.
Yeah, so I had a creativity slides. I decided to be creative with my font choice this week. So I had describing what Stanford's approach is to creativity. Do I agree with it? How it's applicable, et cetera, et cetera. Basically on their website, they state at the very top, they believe that everyone has the capacity to be creative, and that their design school or their D school is a place where people can use design to develop their own creative potential. So basically this idea that design can be applied to all kinds of problems, and a lot of times they end up being messy and pretty complex. They had 4 main approaches to unleashing creativity, which I listed there. Radical collaboration really, I think, sat really well with me. Basically, to inspire this creative thinking and innovation, they bring together students, faculty, and other people from pretty much all disciplines they can get their hands on and different backgrounds to push these different points of view that allow their students to advance in their own design practice, because we do have all these different points of view that we're working with. And I feel like radical collaboration is huge in any workplace, because oftentimes it's not going to be a one man or one woman show. It's going to be collaborating with a team, kind of like we do every single week. So that definitely hit home for me. Real world projects. Basically, their classes challenge students to tackle problems that are happening like right now, the ones that are happening in the real world, not from just a textbook page, which I thought was great. They work with partners and stuff, which I had no idea. They work with different nonprofits and organizations to actually tackle real problems in the classroom, which was awesome. Again, I definitely agree on that stance as well, because life is out there happening right now, and it's not just found in a textbook. So I really love that they really make a push to make the learning matter. Another way they unleash creativity is through unbounded problems. So they take a stance where, like in life, there's no right answer or no single right answer in a D school class. The problems are going to be complex, they're going to be ambiguous. Students are actually encouraged to experiment and make mistakes, just like we are in our learning right now with the lean and everything like that. And the last one, 100% opt-in culture, basically the idea that people who are there actually want to be there, which I thought was great. A little bit idealized, because in the real world, do we all necessarily want to be at work when we're having to collaborate on a project? Probably not. But I thought it sounded great for their little premise. You want to go to the next slide. And all those things are definitely applicable in my job because I just moved out of sales to this new position, and it's super exciting because we're this brand new department where there's just 2 of us right now, and there's going to be 4 of us, and really on the ground floor. So everything is going to be creativity. When I looked into the Stanford's website, they actually had examples of how they had things happening in the classroom, happening out in the real world. So I found this project that they took on to kind of reframe the way K through 12 education is looked at. And this basically was a 2016 collaboration with IDEO, which is a design company. And the whole challenge was to shadow a student. They had 1,500 leaders, or that was their goal. They ended up having 1,765, which was great. But they had these like teachers and administrators shadow their students for a day. And the whole goal was to gain empathy, which I thought was awesome. The participating educators came away with a lot of pretty powerful insights, everything from just, do my students actually feel challenged during the day, to also remembering how hard it is to just like sit and absorb, information all day long. I'm going to go to the last slide I have here. There are basically 8 core abilities that were listed. I'm not going to go through all of them, just the ones that kind of resonated with me. Navigating ambiguity. This is the ability to recognize and persist in the discomfort of not knowing, which a lot of times can be really difficult. And it's to develop these tactics to overcome ambiguity when we need to, which I can definitely use in my position because it's all going to be new and ambiguous. We're basically having to build out this whole system of, it's a solar company, so we have to build out this whole system of what utility companies buy back for solar power. So it's this huge database that we're going to have to create, which is going to be super exciting, but definitely a big undertaking. Experiment rapidly. Oh my gosh, super applicable to our learning. This ability is about being able to quickly generate ideas. But what I thought was interesting and different is the key point that they made is that you have to be able to relax your mind and reach a mode of acceptance. And that's going to eliminate this natural tendency that we all have to block off ideas that seem off or unfeasible, which is definitely a struggle, I think, for a lot of us, definitely for me. The last one, communicate deliberately. Oh my gosh, how many times have we all been in a situation that could have easily been rectified with just simple, clear communication? So this core ability, it's the ability to form, capture, and relate stories, ideas, concepts, and learning to the appropriate audiences.
Yeah, that's really good. I really did enjoy studying about the design school and the collaboration that they had. And I found that I liked that one better than I did the one that Brian was describing. I had some, yeah, it was really good.
Thanks for pitching in there, Jared. I realized I was on mute. I'm like talking. Sorry. I had number 4, talk about Stanford's bootcamp bootleg. And what is it? We're looking at more of an outline of the design thinking process. It kind of focuses more on creativity and how we can design different prototypes and different models to essentially get to our end goal. So it follows 5 sequential modes that build on a human-centered approach. It's all grounded in empathy. Empathy is number 1, making sure that you're understanding what it is that your market wants. And then you want to develop a better understanding of what your users, what you're going to need to make. And then ideate is searching for those solutions that typically don't come up right away. It's thinking, in-depth thinking about what it really is that you're going to need to create, and then follows with prototyping. So you're implementing those ideas on a smaller scale. We're making these designs intended to work out those kinks and physically interacting with those ideas. And then the last sequential mode is making ideas better as a react. And then you can go to the next slide there too. Because to follow with this Stanford Bootcamp bootleg, I actually watched a little webinar from Stanford, and there was a lot of critiques around it. I think as time went on, they started to realize that different things weren't working out exactly how they thought with this idea, because it is very simple as far as like being creative and creating that prototype and going through different processes. with it, but it's really based on a different theory of knowledge. One of the quotes was a Peter Drucker quote, says culture eats process for lunch. And I thought that was a great way of saying it, because honestly, like, no matter what process that you're using, it could be lean startup, it could be the Stanford bootleg bootcamp, or sorry, bootcamp bootleg, but it really depends on your culture of the company, making sure that you are all on the same page, you are having the right team to work on the right projects. You also can't get reliable data about the problem, and that, like, a lot of people like to focus on the data, and they always want data, 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 and sometimes they think surveys are the best option for that, and they constantly want to just keep making these models and keep doing these rapid different tests, like Brian had mentioned earlier, just keep testing and doing different models of different things. But really, it's just not the easiest way to do it. It's really important that they're innovating, and most organizations will skip out on that process and fail due to rushing. And so I think I covered all of that on there. But one of the other things I wanted to mention before we do move on is that a lot of companies have this failure to fail. And as Ali had mentioned earlier, failing is like one of the biggest things that people just don't, they just don't want it to happen. And so it really hinders their ability to really test and figure out what it is that their market really wants, because it's so common that they get wrapped up in, oh, well, I know what's going on, I know the data, I know all these things, but when in reality they really don't. They just really like the idea of it. So I will pass it on over.
Thank you, Corey Ann, for the handoff. So I am talking about the 3 Stanford mixtapes, and that those are understand, experiment, and ideate. And so in the first point, I said, why the mixtape? And of course, I put in there that you have to think about this, and just like how Stanford includes it as the soundtrack to your next journey. You have to think about, what are you trying to accomplish? The same thing whenever you're doing anything in your life, whenever you want to put on Spotify, Apple Music, what are you trying to get done? Are you trying to focus? Are you trying to get a good workout in? What are you trying to do? And you have to think about these mixtapes as that. Don't look at these as a process, but just use one as a good tool for knowing your customers better. Do you need to be able to collaborate with your team better? Do you need to be able to create better prototypes? What is the problem? So why the mixtape? You can use it for creating a website, a business plan. So the first one is going to be understand. So this is where you're going to be interviewing and observing users. You're going to be able to use empathy, because you want to emerge, engage, and immerse into your audience. You want to be able to, of course, understand those users, and be able to, just like what I said, assume a beginner's mindset in order to gain more empathy. And what that means is that you always want to be able to question. You want to be able to just think that they do not know exactly what page you're on, so that way you can gain a better insight. And then the second point is engage with extreme users. The reason why you want to be able to engage with them is because you want to be able to, like I said, gain a better insight with people with different backgrounds, people with different experiences. That's why we do celebrate diversity and inclusion, in my company, because, like I said, you want to be able to engage with different people. I'm not saying that these people are extreme by any means, but you want to be able to gain different insights to everyone's life, so that way you can collaborate better as a team, and that brings more creativity to the team. And then, of course, use what, why, and how. You want to be able to kind of test your problem, see what exactly you want to be able to test, and then collaborate with your team with those types of questions. You want to interview for empathy. You can use story sharing and an empathy map with your team. So that way, it's all just creativity, all collaboration. You want to be able to synthesize your findings and discover meaningful insights. You can go ahead and go to the next one. I'll talk about experiment next, Jared. All right, so experiment slide. is going to be where you're developing all of those solution concepts. You want to be able to create that solution for your product. And of course, just like what Brian was talking about, you want to be able to test prototypes with users. There's different types of prototypes, such as the Wizard of Oz prototypes. You're just utilizing the resources that you already had. So of course, that's just like what Brian was stating, how you can't prototype everything. I mean, you want to be able to be as efficient as possible. The Wizard of Oz prototype definitely gets that done. And then why? So why are we even going to prototype? So of course, like we were talking about, it allows the user to physically play with the product, to physically test it, and so that way you're learning as well as the user is able to give feedback. And you know, of course, you're able to be able to collaborate with your team later on and build a better solution. So and just like what Stanford was stating, be happy when you fail on your prototypes. You want to be able to focus on your time. Like we were saying, you want to be able to be as efficient as possible. Don't get too attached to a prototype, definitely. And you want to be able to capture feedback. And like I put in the back on the bottom, I don't know why I said back, because failing is an opportunity when testing, and it allows you to, of course, be creative. This week we talked a lot about creativity. We want to keep going on that. So the next mixtape is going to be the Ideate mixtape. So this is where you're going to reframe your challenge. So the Stoke concept, whenever it comes to, this is just a team exercise. It's and of course I put on the side there, it's just energizing your team. It's just going to be a way for everyone to kind of get up out of their seat, move around, get the blood flowing. And then this also allows for creative ideas to come about whenever the team is a little bit more energized and they're not just being stoic in their chair, stagnant, I meant. And then with the next one is brainstorm, collaborate. Of course, we all know about brainstorming. You want to start off with the how might we questions. You want to kind of have one conversation at a time. These are just the rules that I outlined. You want to encourage those wild ideas. Be visual. You want to stay on topic to not get off track. And you want to be able to, of course, build on the ideas of others. And the whenever it comes with the solution concepts, it kind of taps on just on brainstorming, but you want to be able to select with intention. So what that means is say that we all have an idea, and you know, I put in there vote on the best ideas and work off of these ideas. Say that we all have a different idea, and the vote system is going to be, you know, well, we all have completely elaborate ideas, and we put them on a whiteboard with a sticky note, and we say, you know what, Jared, even though your idea is completely off the wall, I mean, this is great. And we all want to be able to select with intention, which means that you want to be able to keep the ones that people are most passionate about. And then also, of course, we're going to be able to vote on the best ideas. And then not only that, but say that we all completely don't like Jared's, sorry that I'm picking on you, Jared, but you know, let's say that we don't even like his idea. And then we just continue to work off of his idea and get creative. So really, I mean, just to kind of wrap up these mixtapes, don't look at it like a process, of course. Look at it each as an individual album or soundtrack for what you want to accomplish. And really, it's all about just being creative at the end of the day. So, yeah, so I'll go ahead and hand it off to the next person. Thank you.
Yeah, and with the idea generation and stuff, in the Innovators Method book that I was reading, Leatherman, they had someone come up with the idea of, well, why don't we just send a monkey in the package with every package so they can assemble it together? And that's the worst, or not worst, but like most off the wall idea. But from that crazy idea, they came up with, oh, assembly should be very simple and easy enough for an ape to do it, you know? So these ideas and idea generation is a very positive thing. We should encourage that. So moving on to the next one, I just want to look at how technology has changed and where we're going into the future. So the two major things that have changed is mobile device technology, huge changes, and automation. So back in 2010, when I was in my undergrad, like the popular phone around was a flip phone, the Razor flip phone, you know, you remember those things. And now you jump forward to 2020 now, and during COVID, upwards of 80% of e-commerce was happening on a smartphone. So it has really changed the way that we operate. there's Google Teams on the phone, there's Zoom apps and everything. So everything is mobile these days, and people are mobile with that. Automation has changed the world. When you think of automation, you think of Amazon with their robotics in their factories, and then obviously Tesla with their self-driving automated technology. They've gone so far as to be working on self-driving semi-trucks for the trucking industry, which they call semi. So big changes coming in the future that we'll talk about. So something that has really changed are the way we look at creativity. And through studying creativity this week, it's really opened my mind to not judging the whole napping pod idea that our generation has come up with. When you sleep on an idea, subconsciously you start putting puzzle pieces together when you're, as opposed to when you're super laser focused on it. All you're thinking of is the details. But taking breaks and taking some recreational time at work, like with Google having foosball tables or rock climbing walls in their facilities. These are the changes that we're seeing, and virtual meetings as well. This technology is absolutely here to stay. So 3 decades out into the future, and really less than that, what we need to be focusing on is STEM. So we need to be focusing on science and technology. I do see that the trucking industry and even the shipping industry across seas, it's all going to be automated soon. Uber is talking about self-driving technology as well. We're just moving towards clean energy. We're moving towards the triple bottom line, which is taking care of the environment within business. But we will move on to the next point.
All right, so we're running a little short on time, so I'll be brief with mine. In regard to invention versus innovation, I just kind of like to relate it back to my field a little bit. I started thinking about my colleagues a little bit in healthcare and thinking, we're all innovators in our own ways, but within the business, there's a lot of innovation as well. I think of invention more as, from a definition standpoint, more like just creating a product, service, or device, whereas innovation is actually capturing the economic value. The invention is more simplistic. You make stuff to fix stuff, whereas innovation is thoughtful and deliberate. You're kind of, especially like in healthcare, you're really approximating the margin of safety with innovation, analyzing existing information and processing new information. So in innovation, you're seeking ways of doing things more effectively, more efficiently through informed decision making. With invention, again, more simplistic, make stuff to fix stuff idea. As far as resources, with invention, you're applying your existing resources. There may be a little bit of waste in there. With innovation, you're seeking out, you're identifying new resources, and you're mobilizing them where they're needed the most. As far as qualities that relate to our careers, invention, again, I kind of think of it more as like a hurried or last minute or riskier type of thing, where it's very simple and straightforward. Whereas innovation, it's useful for building upon creative new practices and processes and relationships. So in our current business, we need to continuously reflect and incrementally innovate in order to create value. So I'm just going back to what Jared was just talking about a little bit with technology. I just started thinking about a company that I invest in called Intuitive Surgical, and that company is a robotic company and constantly innovating. It's something that it's an invention, but nobody even thought of how that could transform surgeries and how it really has been able to do so. So that innovation is constant and it's still happening. And that's kind of the difference between those two ideas. So I'll go ahead and hand it over for the next slide.
Okay, so Christensen's innovator's dilemma. The whole idea is, do we cater to the current needs of our customers, or do we adapt new inventions to answer needs that could create growth in the future? Do we solve the urgent problems of our existing customers, or do we try to solve a problem for non-customers? We all kind of tend to choose the urgent over the important, but the real dilemma itself is the fact that, you know, large innovators have some motivation to innovate, but there's also this strong disincentive from doing so because new products will undermine their existing ones. We're going to go to the next slide. So with our company, you know, we sell solar panels. We're seeing new solar panels being created that generate more power in the same amount of space. So we have an LG 335 watt panel being replaced with an LG 355. Same exact price, same exact, you know, dimensions, but the 355 gives us more wattage. Well, now our 335s are obsolete. So we have customers who are always like, what happens if technology changes in the future? And it's a hard thing to answer because technology will change. But my argument is, if we all waited for the next technology, none of us would have a smartphone, a computer, an iPad, etc. Basically, there's always something a customer wants, and it always seems super urgent. As a corporation or a company, we can kind of feel like there's no time or energy to seek those bigger innovations. You know, storytelling, make the message make sense, kind of our whole goal as managers, that whole idea of disruptive innovation, solving our problems of our non-customers can be difficult because a lot of times our customers aren't even the best judge of what they want. If you want to go to the next slide, I found a really great example, Blockbuster. They were this unchallenged empire in 2000 to bankrupt in 2010. Basically, they were killed off by these big on-demand streaming sites. The innovator's dilemma had a huge impact here because they had two choices: continue doing what works well now, or adopt disruptive advancements to stay relevant. Unfortunately, we all know what happened. They basically refused to kind of keep up with the times, and now they are defunct and depleted, and now it's all Netflix, Hulu, Disney Plus, et cetera, et cetera. The last thing is that whole innovator's S-curve. So basically, I thought this was super cool because it's a model that captures the product or technology's life cycle. So it tracks the impact or popularity of the product from its origination point to the point of which it's retired. So they use this example of CDs and MP3 players where we have this fermentation stage while cassettes are still dominant, but we're seeing CDs kind of start to ferment. Then the technology gets proven. We have these early adopters saying, okay, yeah, this thing is pretty cool. We have that takeoff. Then we have the CDs mature, their performance is super strong. And now we have this S-curve connection where MP3s are now getting proven and CDs are now having this discontinuity stage. So this S-curve that every product follows is just kind of inevitable for technology, where it's the pace of change and innovation, and it's going to vary over time and between your industry.
And whenever it comes to creativity and how it relates to innovation, basically innovation is applied creativity. Innovation can't exist without creativity. Businesses really need to create that team that's able to bring innovative ideas, like Ali mentioned with Blockbuster, innovative ideas into action. Like that's one of the most important things to learn about business. Innovative teams can provide analyzation of the markets, recognition of gaps, and they can also, in turn, create suggestive solutions. You can go to the next one. One of the great examples of this that I can relate to is music. As a songwriter and being in the world of music, it's really important to be innovative and keep up with the changing technology, the changing currents. I like to produce music as well, and as you can tell, like back in the day, Mozart, it's completely different than Mozart's productions, essentially. So Mozart made music with a unique sound, and he took these risks, but he broke so many barriers with his classical style, and he was very innovative with his rhythms and syncopations, and that in turn, made him such a successful musician. And we can still apply that to today's world with music and how popular it's become with the electronic EDM stuff and that kind of production and chasing the sound that's hot at the moment. So I thought that was super cool. And I think we touched on Tesla, so I'll skip that one for now. But we can go on. I'll pass it over to Sarah to finish up.
Thank you, Corianne, for the handoff. Yeah, so I had the very last one, which was the please reflect on this course. To be honest with you, Dr. Meeks, I don't this was definitely a challenge for me, as I know that this would be a challenge for everyone else. But I do believe that possibly things that could be added to the course could be collaboration a little bit more with the professor outside of the classroom. This allows for us to be able to get to know you a little bit better if you are more open to that. And then also it allows us to be accountable. So I know in the beginning of the semester you got to know us a little bit. This would kind of help us maybe get to know you. Just kind of a, a suggestion that I thought of. Of course, we want to be able to have open conversation, getting to know you a little bit better. So that was kind of tapping off the first idea. So removed, I don't believe that anything needs to be removed. Changed, I do think that you know, I do love working with one team. I think it kind of operates as a business. However, I think maybe one day you can possibly switch up the teams every now and then. Maybe we can get like a new team every other week to kind of collaborate with different people, and it might help other people to kind of see or maybe understand the course material from a different perspective. Just kind of a thought. And then reading materials. Of course, I just put that it's a lot of information to gather for the final exam. So I feel like I'm connecting all the dots, but feel like I'm going to forget some information. But then again, I feel like that's with even with my undergrad. I know that we all kind of experience that with everything going on our plates. But so that was just another one. And then instructions on the course.